Yeah, I'm talking with without without it pressed play. So curious if you guys can hear me. Chat thing, I'm gonna see. Okay, you can. Okay, great. It's just something strange going on because the screen comes up and it wants me to press play. I don't know why. Okay, so I won't press play. And then I'm gonna share to see if you guys can see. Can you see the human design image? Okay, awesome. Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Beth, let me know when you're here. As long as you two are here, I'm happy. I mean, if others come, that's great. It's awesome. Whoever else wants to jump in. We'll start just as soon as Beth is here. Thanks so much for you guys' patience. I'm just gonna delete the last one for confusion. If I can get to it. Oh my gosh. I think I can. Okay, so I'll start in a couple minutes. I'm just going to delete. Looks like another video was made. And so I don't want to keep confuse people. Well, it's not streaming anymore. I'm gonna see if I can delete it real quick. Okay, I'm gonna start in just a minute. I'm just gonna delete the other video that wasn't working. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start. You guys can comment in the chat if you want for questions or comments. Just note that here. Okay, so go to this image. Send me to YouTube on the computer so I could see you guys. I'm just waiting for, okay, there I can see you guys in. Oh, hey, Jay. Don't know you. Happy to have you. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna get started. So you guys could see this here. I could see it. Make sure I have the page right in control. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see my cursor as it moves about here? I think this little sign is in the way. Okay, so this is the human design chart of the author of the story, The Tunnel. Now, there was a little bit of confusion because there's another chart or another date that was online. And I have an Argentinian friend, but I wasn't able to get a hold of her to see if we could um, validate the authenticity of this particular one. But there's not too much difference. It's the same year and not too many days away. Obviously, he's not alive, so he's not 113 years old. My understanding is that he died, I think, at 99. So this is about 14 years ago. And I hear myself. Hold on. Okay, I see the problem. Okay. And oh, let me see if you guys are not hearing the audio or not. Okay, you can. Okay, good. Okay, great to see you, Beth. Okay. So this is his human design. I can see you guys on a chat on a different computer. So I just have the two computers side by side. So I can't do anything without two or three computers. So this is his human design. And for those of you in the Discord, you can see the dream rave. Well, all of you can see the dream rave. And so this is really interesting. because we can see, for example, that he was a pure generator 1-4. And 1-4s are the types that they're on their track. No one can push them off their track. They have a very specific juxtaposition destiny, and it's very different than all the other types. The 1-4 or the 4-1 have this juxtaposition destiny. The 1-4 is more like the 1-3 is that they have to create a very solid foundation. Now, Sabato is interesting because he was actually a physicist. He actually studied to become a physicist, and he was. He also studied psychology and obviously literature on his own, but he was a physicist, so it's a very interesting kind of mind. He actually wrote only three novels, which was a trilogy, this being the first, On Heroes and Tombs being the second, and The Exterminating Angel being the third. The second is unreadable in the context of reading it live. It's a very large novel. It's amazing, but it's stream of consciousness style. Only the third chapter, Report on the Blind, has is would be worth reading. And there's a reference in the following novel, his second, to the tunnel. So it's kind of interesting. It's like the same world. And The Exterminating Angels, the third novel, which I never read. I had, but I just never got to it. It was very different than the first two. Now, Sabato burned many of his novels. So, the Tunnel was the first one he didn't burn and that he actually published. And it was only because his wife was so upset at him not wanting to publish it. So he did. And you could see he's a pure generator and he has a 2838, which means he needs to kind of push through life, like really test reality to find out what's worth it. What is the value of being alive? And he also has the channel of cycles, the 5342, which means everything he does has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is a not a vortex channel, there's another term for it that I'm forgetting. But these particular three channels below the sacral to the root overlay over the whole chart. So this means that every gate, every center is subject to cycles. And just check in real quick if you guys are hearing me. And so what it is that he has two channels and his activations are, oh, thanks. Thanks so much, Jay. And so his only two activations are going to be the spleen. Well, the two channels are the channel struggle and the channel cycles. And they're activating the sacral, the root, and the spleen. So with that open solar plexus center, not just undefined, but keep in mind it's open because there's no gates. And so this is a very sensitive, very, very vulnerable being to the emotional wave and the heights and extremes of emotion. And part of why he's able to convey it so well, he can feel the waves of those who have the emotional wave, but also be protected from it so that he can concentrate and write. Not that emotional wave authorities can't do the same. It's just a different type of organization of the field. And it's interesting. I have the same thing. I have the open solar plexus and I'm super, super sensitive to emotions. And yet at the same time, I can be intense. So it just doesn't, sometimes it's hard to make sense of that, what that means. And with this open mind and open ajna, easy flow between understanding wisdom and how people are different. This is something that's problematic for me with my defined ajna, is I can only get stuck and think in one way. It's why when I write fiction, it's always first person narration, unreliable narrator. And Sabato wrote The Tunnel, it's first person, unreliable narrator. But his second novel, Streams of Consciousness, so it's from the perspectives of different characters. I just feel like I could be wrong. I haven't done a whole human design study of literary writers. But for me, that's what I feel it is. Now, something else to notice is he has one. If you look at these areas that are red and black, you have the 12 here. That's one. That's because there's two planets there. If we look down, we see Pluto is in gate 12 on both sides, both the design and the personality. So that's one overlay. The second one is in gate 48, and that is his, let's see, it's his Earth on the design side, and on the personality side, it's his Moon. Then we have gate 44, and that's his Jupiter on the design side, and his South Node on the personality side. Then we have gate 42, and God, these are all over the place. And so on the design side, it's his Mercury, and on the personality side, it's his Mars. And then the final overlay is gate 60. And we see for gate 60, the gate of darkness, Uranus is both sides. I say the gate of darkness, but it's really only the, no, it is the gate of darkness, yeah. And so Uranus is there. So he has one, two, three, four, five overlays. Six, actually. I missed this one up here, the 24. Now you'll see the 24. That means that's six overlays. So we're looking at someone who was really aware, didn't miss anything. High reflexive awareness, doesn't miss nothing. And a lot of open centers, open ego, open solar plexus, open G, needed a community. He was very outspoken. He's very admired in Argentina because he stood up at the time when most of the politic and the leaders of the communities, the artistic leaders, um, didn't speak up, and people were being disappeared, thrown off of airplanes, murdered, tortured. Well, they were putting in a new government. This was in the 70s, and he spoke up. And I don't know why he didn't end up dead. I don't know the details of what all happened and how he was able to survive. Maybe he was so well respected. But he spoke up against it, very courageous. The 20, gate 20 here, when connected to the 10, is about the importance of speaking with right timing and calling things out for what they are. And so people with the 20 have to do that. They have to call it out. And the 10 is behavior, but so the 10 would have came in transit. So the 20 is part of why he had the courage to speak out. And care with 27, there's definitely care for others. And testing reality, the 39 and the 3828 channel struggle. Very sensitive being with the 12, very sensitive to the voice of others. His own voice would only be able to speak in response, being a generator and being open, um, throat center. He also has a 13, which is the gate of the listener. This is part of the storytelling channel, the 3313. And so telling his stories. And then the 24 up here is a mind that this could be, if you remember the novel, the character of Juan Pablo Castel, is stuck in his head. He's looping, right? That's what we're seeing in the novel, is like a character lost in his mind. We've kind of talked about this in some of the responses in the chats. And he's looping, he loops. The 24 is the gate of looping. So we know that Sabato did this as well as a person, as a human. He was susceptible to looping and with that 24, but that 24 is also a vision. So once the looping is able to unravel itself from that particular loop, it can really spiral out and be creative with vision, with great vision. And so I would say the vision of his novels is going to be very closely expressed by Gate 24, Gate 13, Gate 12, Gate 60 is a gate of darkness, and his all his works fairly dark in expression. The 2838, which is the testing of reality, and Beth asked the question, is looping akin to rumination? Give me a second to ponder that and to look up to make sure I have an understanding of rumination. So rumination, according to an AI overview, I'd rather have an Oxford definition. Hold on. So in the Oxford definition, it's a deep or considered thought about something, the action of chewing the cud. Looping, I would say, is more like this, Beth. And I say this because I suffered in my 20s from looping, and it was horrific. But it was like an image in my mind that was repeating, and it was horrific. I can't even remember for how long it happened. Probably not long, but I remember it was so horrific that uh, I just quit whatever I was doing, whatever um, drugs or anything I was doing at the time, at that age. And I was young. I was like 20. And but I've also seen it in people with the 6124. And I had a friend who she would loop, and it's a type of perseveration, I think, where like they just can't, they're just stuck. They're just stuck. And then they're so lost that it becomes externalized where they can become really upset. I don't know if that makes sense. That's just my conception of it. Maybe some of you guys have the 24, but I don't think it's the same as rumination. And then you mentioned looping could be perseveration. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Perseverating. That's exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so the 48 is interesting to look at too. These are people that have a lot of depth, and he has an overlay there. And the planets he has there is his moon and his earth. So this is very deep. This is a very powerful, because the moon is kind of our deepest heart, our deepest soul, and it's very significant in its expression in the human design because it's the kind of home that you have. The moon represents the kind of home you need. And so the 48 is going to be his deepest depth and his coming to terms with that. Now we're going to go to his dream rave. Now, as you can see, it's not showing the names. We who've looked at the dream rave know how horrific it is in the sense of the programming and how dark it is. So a lot of the names are not here. I decided to just do this kind of mandala hybrid chart. But we could at least see the activations. So he's got the activation of the 62 and 12. I'm not as familiar with these, so I'm not going to remember those. But the other ones I remember. So he's got the 42. 42 is like he just can't let go of things. It's just very hard to let go of things. Endings are almost impossible, any type of ending. And ultimately, the underlay of this is a fear of death, a fear of anything ending. And of course, this can be overcome just as any lower frequency of any gate in the chart can be overcome. And in the dream rave, the overcoming is a little bit more challenging and a little bit more nuanced. So with the 53, there's also a deep fear of beginning things. So this is someone who is very sensitive, very difficult to begin to commit to something, and very difficult to end it. So I think he had a happy marriage for a very, very long time. And he was a Cancer, so home would have been very important. And 1911 is Year of the Boar. And boars are the natural writers. Borges is also a boar. Vladimir Nabokov was Year of the Boar. Um, There's some other favorite writers I have that are all Year of the Boar. Not saying it's most prevalent. There are also great writers born in every single Chinese astrology year, but it's very prevalent in Year of the Boar, I have found, at least amongst my favorite writers. So he's born in Argentina. What else? And so you can see he also has gate 38 and 28. And if some of you remember from our studies with Vicky, Vicky was talking about how gate 28 and 38 are very aggressive. There's violent impulses that are expressed in the male and attracted in the females. So when females have the 28 and 38 activations, they can attract aggressive energy. In the male, it's usually an expression of those aggressive energies, is what Vicky's investigations have surfaced. And her examples on her channel. And her channel is Your Unique Design, I think. And she covers the dream rave in more depth than I do. Now, so that's intense. And so that could make sense with the violent impulses expressed in this novel. Now, before we finish, I'm going to touch on the novel I'm reading next because it's an antecedent, it's an ancestor of the tunnel. Sabato read The Invention of Morel by Bioy Casares. And the tunnel is actually a kind of version of it. And the tunnel is very great and succinct in its expression. You'll see that The Invention of Morel is more like a science fiction story, but it's very similar in what occurs. Sabato's is more of like a mystery crime, fun, quick, I mean, dark and disturbing, but a very quick, succinct novel. It's very existentialist if you guys have read The Stranger by Albert Camus, that famous novel written in France, which had the main character murdering an Arab on a beach supposedly because the sun was in his eyes, which is absurd, and where the term the absurd comes from. It's absurd kind of art, which relegated emotional depth and human understanding to kind of the idea that it's irrelevant, that just humanity's so absurd, which in itself is very absurd. Even in interpretation of the Stranger by Camus, like the novel is false. The literary critic Roger Shattuck did a great review of it years later and confirmed this, and I agree with him. These are novels that are very seductive, very dark and very seductive in a certain way. I won't necessarily go into that. And what it means is like it's an expression of dark realities, but it's representation, so it just gets so deep into literary criticism, but we're not going to do that here. That's kind of too much. So we have a sense of who he is. Now I'm going to go to the story. Any guys have more questions or anything concerns about this human design chart before I go to the story? Let me know in the chat, and I'll take a quick peek. His Venus sequence moon is line 6, you could see here, which means even though he's undefined, he would get stuck in his head. So his energy would move up here and he'd get stuck there. And with all his writing, I'd say and with the energy in this chart, I would say he was operating best when he was writing, using his intuition in the moment, in response, by his own impulses, by his own energy, not influenced by the surroundings with a defined root. But of course, kind of moving around these open centers here. And so there could have been a tendency when emotionally traumatized or upset that he would have went straight to the head, his energy, and getting stuck in the 24, which again makes sense with the perseveration and the um, looping of the mind. Okay, so I'm going to stop here if there's nothing else. I don't think there's nothing else I could say. Pluto in gate 12 is very interesting. That's a gate very sensitive to expression. There's a hesitation, almost like some of these people who have gate 12 active stutter, um, and there's a hesitation upon expressing the self. So, and there's an overlay there. So that's another great depth of expression. Um, so very fascinating chart, especially with the dream wave here. The 62, I'm trying to remember. I think the 62 is, no, I'm not remembering. I don't want to remember wrong. Apologize that I didn't double check these before coming on. But a lot of activity in the dream wave, and he's a generator while he's asleep. So that's a good point I forgot to mention. So he's a generator while awake and a generator while asleep. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to look for something else to share. See what I can find. Probably going to go straight to the novel so we can read and just start discussing the novel. And I won't always show it on the screen because there's really no necessity to. But I'm going to show now one of the covers of this text if I can get it. No, I did the EPUB version. Okay, you guys have already seen it, so if it doesn't come, oh no, here it is. Okay, great. Okay, give me a second. I'll share this with you. No, it wouldn't stay. Oh, that's really annoying. Let's see. There's a quote in Spanish that's not in the American text that I just saw, but I'm not going to have the time to translate it. Maybe I'll add it to something else at some point. Okay, so give me a sec. And I'll ask you guys what you felt about the novel after I go over it. I am going to be complicating the interpretation of this novel and what it's doing for sure, as your literary professor today. Okay, give me a second. Here we go. Okay, so this is, I don't know the history of this cover as I don't read Spanish, but hopefully you guys can see this here. So this is, oh, I messed it up. Okay, let me know if you guys can't see this. If you can also think of, I put this on the cover of most of the videos. So it was the painting of a woman with chestnut hair walking on the beach with a translucent dress. Well, actually, the whole body looks translucent. It's hard to tell, but it's as if the character is not real, and neither is the world. It's like overlays on top of each other. It's like holographic thoughts or holographic plates reflecting images. Even the water looks real surreal. It's just flat. It's like a creeping kind of thick, viscous soup. And everything's very flat. Can you guys see that? The sky is gray and there's a shadow. The woman has a shadow there. The shadow doesn't look well outlined. And then there's a window opening up the window sills on each side. And then as if someone's looking through binoculars. But it's deeper than that. This is the type of, almost all the literature I read corresponds to this. You can see that there's an outline of a circle and everything's black around it. This was very common in the writing of Kafka, especially in The Castle, where every chapter begins with blackness, and then the image slowly comes into focus. And what this means is that you're in the mind. You are in the mind of this reality, and you're perceiving from a mind. So there is no ultimate reality being expressed. So as I mentioned in the chats, the novel is written with all the perceivable furniture of an everyday third density world. But really, everything that's occurring is from the perspective of a character, of a narration that, well, we can't verify. So in literature, we call this the unreliable narrator. We don't know what's true and what's not. We're being told this, we're being told that. We don't know what's true and what's not. We don't know if the character of Maria even existed or ever existed. This could be a fantasy. At the end of the novel, we see that the character is, oh, Twilight Mist, you got a response. Yeah, like a ghost of the idea of a woman in a place of in between, a nowhere place where the land meets at sea. Brilliant. Genius. Oh, that's so well expressed. I'm going to steal that from you if you allow me to. So, yes, a nowhere place where land meets sea. The point at which land meets the water is a gateway between two different realities. The gateway in itself, that meeting between the two, is exactly as she expressed. It's a nowhere place. It's not anything. It's not sea and it's not land. And you could see that she's standing on land, but it's hard to tell. The dress covers everything. We don't know if there's even feet there. So it's like the more evidence that it's like a ghost floating above the ground. And the dress being translucent and her body, the part of her body that's over this supposed water, is colored in the same color, just a little off, not as dark. So it's clear that this is very much a fantasy that we're reading. And so let's go deeper into this. I do want to mention, I don't know if I'll bring up the picture, but a lot of us had to read The Metamorphosis in school. I don't know if you guys did by Franz Kafka. What's fascinating about that story is, and one day I'll read that and do a whole review on that. But it's the same idea. And I don't want to say too much more because I want to really get deep into that one. That's one of my favorites. Is when Kafka had The Metamorphosis published in book form, the editors wanted to put a giant dung beetle on the cover of the book because that's what the character claimed, the narration claimed that the character transformed into. Kafka went into a panic and said, no, you will not print any image of any bug in reference to the story. Does that make sense to you guys? He didn't want an image of the bug associated with the story because there was no bug. No one turned into a bug. And so this is repeated in literature. It's not the most common trope in the world, but a lot of stories. Actually, it is kind of very common in different variations. I mean, actually, it's quite common in fantasy, especially in our latest fantasy that got really popular. What was it? The story of that boy from England. What is that? Harry Potter. It's clear that that story is like a boy who was suffering a tortured childhood, and then his fantasy world just blew up, and he fabricated the whole world of this special school and all these things. So it's actually fairly common in literature. Sharon says she had to read The Metamorphosis. I look forward to you presenting it. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, that The Metamorphosis by Kafka is an ancestor of Dostoevsky's The Underground Man. And all these novels, all these stories, even anything by Lovecraft or Edgar Allan Poe, these are really all antecedents of a short story called The Horla by Marcel Duchamp, a French author who wrote this amazing short story. In fact, the whole structure of it was stolen by not stolen. Nothing is stolen in creativity. There's no such thing. But H.P. Lovecraft's whole style of the lack of ontological of being able to capture an ontology, an ontological reality, is from the language of this short story called The Horla by Marcel Duchamp. That story is incredible. Another one I may go over at some point. Okay, so let me stop this. I'm going to go right into the novel. I can't go into this one because this is the Spanish version, and I'm not going to be reading terrible Spanish. Okay, so give me a second and I'll share. Okay, so this is a PDF download, and it's going to give us some info. Most of it I've already went over. And so let me just find so I can share. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Let me know if you guys can all see this. This is just a little about Sabato. Oh, this one says he was born, let's see, June 24th. So it might be June 24th. That's so weird. Online, it's the other date. He would still have the Pluto-Mars opposition, which we didn't go over, but which makes him very Plutonic. And going through it, you could see that after being rejected by several editors in Buenos Aires, Sabato published El Tunnel in France in Sur magazine, where it was read by Albert Camus, who commissioned the novel for Gallimard. Thomas Mann and Graham Greene quickly announced their admiration for the novel. It has been further translated into more than 10 languages and has become an international bestseller. The other ones are On Heroes and Tombs, The Angel in Darkness. I've read On Heroes and Tombs several times, but I've never read The Angel of Darkness. I had it for a while, but I don't have it anymore. So he did get the recognition of some famous authors. Thomas Mann wrote a book called, um, I think he wrote The Death in Venice, but he wrote a huge novel called Magic Mountain, which is incredible. Incredible. I read it in my German literature class and it was incredible novel. It's like the whole history of war. Not war directly, but just the ideological war. Like there's this battle between two characters, and one's a Jesuit, and so it's very interesting. It's very deep. Graham Greene wrote some novels. Albert Camus, as I was talking about, wrote um, The Stranger, which is a very aesthetically pleasing novel, just like The Tunnel, but it's also incredibly disturbing to read. Let's go further. Okay, so those are all the chapters. Okay, I'm going to read this here. I don't know what this is. This is, I guess, this is about the disappearances in Argentina, and it is with sadness and sorrow that we've carried out the mission entrusted to us by the constitutional president of the Republic. It has been an extremely arduous task, for we had to piece together a shadowy jigsaw. Years after the events had taken place, when all the clues had been deliberately destroyed, all documentary evidence burned, and buildings demolished, the basis of our work has therefore been the statements made by relatives of those who had managed to escape from this hell, or even the testimonies of people who were involved in the repression, but who, for whatever reason, whatever obscure motives, approached us to tell us what they knew. So this is a book called Nunca Más, Never Again. This came out in 84, and this was people standing up against the dictators for what had occurred. And we won't get too into this, except this is this is some things that happened in Argentina. And this is why I always make the argument that the best fiction of the 20th century is in the places where humanity was the most destroyed. And so in Argentina, you have this is the origin of magical realism for those of you who know Marquez and other writers that got famous in the 70s and 80s for writing that kind of floaty, mystical, dreamy, magical realism that I myself don't like. But this was the origination of it in Argentina. And also with what Russia and Eastern Europe suffered under the dictatorship of the Bolsheviks and, whatever that was. That wasn't the Russian people doing it to themselves. That was something else. Um, what the fiction that came out of Russia, Eastern Europe is also very surrealistic in nature, very similar to the Argentinian literature and also incredible. And so I like to say that the best fiction of the 20th century came out of Eastern Europe and Argentina. And let's move forward a little. And of course, Kafka is from Eastern Europe. Well, he was in Germany. Well, we could say Germany, but Prague and stuff. Okay, so let me. Okay, so there's a mention here of Borges and Bioy Casares. I will be reading Borges. Borges only wrote short stories. Bioy Casares got really famous overnight and then lost his recognition because he wrote the Invention of Morel, and after that he just never wrote anything as good. And the novel is fascinating because it presupposes like what we're experiencing today in terms of our reality. And as you guys will see, it's like there's a lot of films that were influenced and inspired by his work. So this talks a little about the tone and sentence structure, and there it is talking about his antecedents being Dostoevsky and Kafka. And let's see. This novel is about madness recollected in a prison cell. It is not an apology for the madness or the actions which the madness caused, nor is it a rational explanation of them. Instead, it leads the reader into the demented world of the protagonist, using a deliberately calm style to suggest that this world is normal. The mind of Juan Pablo Castel is given a logic by the tone and sentence structure of the novel, which are precise and clear. I think this is the contrast, which is really interesting in this story, is that, and Beth and I were talking about this a little, about how the narration is told in a way that is so matter of fact that once you see the contrast of the incidents of the story with the calm telling of it, it creates a juxtaposition that could only be absurd. Of course, the meaning of absurd is a little problematic because the contents are so disturbing, as Beth was pointing out. I mean, they're incredibly disturbing. And yet the tone of the narration is matter of fact. And so this creates the contrast of a very succinct expression of beingness that just causes a certain reaction in the reader. This is like a part of what's so satisfying, I think, about the text is that these insanities within us, these these emotions, these, deepest kind of impulses, right? Plutonic, hidden, repressed impulses that we all have that are characterized by the asteroids and by Pluto. They're all in there. And then in this novel, they're being expressed outwardly in a calm, lucid way. Let's see if it says, yeah, what ensues, yeah, and they're using the word um absurd. So I just want to, it's not allowing me to scroll down, so I have to like somehow pull this up so we could see the page. There we go. Okay. So it says, as in the novels by Dostoevsky and Kafka, there are moments when the rules governing despair are so closely undetermined or re-examined or dramatized that the entire enterprise of living or thinking seems deeply absurd. What ensues is pure comedy. This happens, for example, in a classic scene where Castle post. Yeah, this is what me and Beth were talking about. The scene where he goes to the post office to post a letter. This is near the end. And and then he decides he wishes to retrieve the letter. The encounter with the woman in the post office and the listing of the regulations and demands put the reader on the side of Castell for a while, but not for long. The feeling that Castell is behaving both rationally and outrageously forces the reader to switch loyalty every few sentences. You feel 1 minute that Castell is a maniac and his own worst enemy, and then the next minute you want him to retrieve the letter. This was true to my experience. I even rereading it, I was like, wow, like, can he just get the letter? And then on the other hand, like this guy's a lunatic. Like, why is he like need to send these letters? Like he's crazy. He's lost it. Um, and I think Beth, you said something to the effect of um that it was a horrific scene. Feel free to say more. Got it. Okay. You felt the frustration with his character. It is clear that the tunnel belongs to a literary genre which explored dark areas of the self, and violence and irrationality in the anonymous mean streets of the modern city. It is important to remember that it is an Argentine novel, only because it was open to European influences and contemporary genres, which it set to develop and intensify. Its manic material and its grim laughter, it is not a metaphor for any society, Argentine or otherwise, but yet, because of the style so controlled and factual, and the content, which dealt with the World War violence, disorder, and megalomania reign, it is fascinating to read The Tunnel from 1948 in conjunction with the sober and detailed report which Sabato and his commission produced in 84 about the real murders committed in the real city where the fictional anti-hero Juan Pablo once produced his art and where Sabato produced his first novel. Okay. Beth wrote, how silly, he wrote several letters each day, so why not just write again? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, why didn't he write and say, well, like he would do in conversation, like, oh, I said that in that novel, but I didn't mean to say that. Like, it's so absurd. He was saying things and taking them back all the time, the whole time in conversation with Maria, which was incidentally never a conversation. It was very much one way. The character of Maria is quite two-dimensional. Although there is a moment near the end where she reveals a revelation, and that was fascinating because the narrator notes it and notice how he missed it. Beth wrote, in other words, he vacillated often and would write her multiple times, even in the day. So I could not see why he got so hung up. That's true. It was almost like a scene on purpose, put in there on purpose to climax a certain moment of intensity, but it wasn't a rational follow-up to his style, which was, yes, to write letters all the time, which, is a mania of that is more of not even our time. I mean, people wrote letters, you know, many decades ago, mostly. People still write letters, but it's not very common now. But it's very profound in old literature. Like it's all about letters. It really is. As communication, as a part of communication. So getting into the story, yeah, petulant. That's a nice word there. And for those of you who are not clear on this word, this great word, he was sulking like a child, basically. Petulant means acting with ill temper, just like beside oneself, like just regressing to a child. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see the text. There's a couple main parts I want to read. Uh, Not too much, just a little. We've already been on for an hour, so we'll read a couple things and then I'd like to. You guys can share at any point what you thought of the novel. And Beth got really profound there and said sucky. Back when letter writing was an art form. Yes, when it was an art form and something treasured. We don't appreciate it as much since we got email and phone messages. I still receive letters occasionally. I still write letters because the art of it is like, how would I express it? It's something you savor against this kind of digital, I'm losing my poetic nature right now, but there's something to writing, of course. I have letters. I'm with you. I'm closer to you guys in age than these modern generations. So I wrote and I received letters. And I don't have all of them, but I still have letters, and it is an art. It's the style in which you write, your own cursive or your own form of writing. It's how you what you put on the letter, what you put inside. It's amazing. It's an incredible art. With a fountain pen. That's awesome. I had a fountain pen as well. So here's the opening of the novel. And of course, the opening is absurd. It should be sufficient to say that I'm Juan Pablo Castel, the painter, who killed Maria Iribarne. I imagine that the trial is still in everyone's mind and that no further information about myself is necessary. That's ridiculous, right? Then there's no novel. You're not going to say anything more. Now, one thing I wanted to point out that you guys probably already know is there's a lot of social commentary in the novel. There's a lot of morals that are questioned, collective morals, and it's throughout the whole novel. And mostly he attacks collective consciousness for its lack of awareness. Here he notes, I remember so many catastrophes, so many cynical and cruel faces, so many inhumane actions, that for me memory is a glaring light, illuminating a sordid museum of shame. Now, shame is a big key here in this novel. Obviously, a lot of the things he does in reaction to this perceived or experienced relationship is in response to his own personal shame. He's really dealing with himself and his own feelings of expression for another human being and and the story that he's made up around this character. And so there's a lot of, I mean, a psychologist can have a field day with this novel. The character is almost a typical either borderline or narcissistic kind of, or enmeshed kind of human male, and the psychological, extremely so. I mean, really more so to what I think it was Carl Jung's fellow psychologist, I'm forgetting her name right now, Marie Von, where she talked about as the most severe impact of trauma of the male losing his anima is living in a fantasy world, pretty much. And that's what this novel is or expresses. And even if it was a real reality, it actually corresponds perfectly with the impulses and the things he does towards the end of the novel in response to the perceivable partner or whatever woman. And he repeats who he is, which is another interesting thing, as if he needs to remind himself of who he is. And now he's talking about the motivation behind writing about his crime. Now, there's a film by Louis Buñuel. He was a surrealist, and he has this movie called The Criminal Life of Archibeto Cruz. And he made most of his films in Mexico. And this is an incredibly interesting film in light of what we're reading right now with this story, because in the movie, Archibeto is trying to convince everyone that he's a murderer, that he's a criminal, and he needs to be arrested. And he keeps going to the cops and telling them, like, you need to arrest me. I did this horrible thing. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it's a hilarious film, but it's that kind of it's the same kind of surrealist, fabulist, or fantastic energy that these Argentinian fabulist novels have, which is living in their imagination, not in reality. And so it's a great film. Um, I don't know if it was influenced by Sabato or Morel. Probably Morel for sure. Invention of Morel by Bioy Casares, the novel I'm gonna read next. And but it's real interesting. I'm trying to get deeper with this. I'd have to get deeper into understanding that kind of context because it's like he's trying to convince us that he did a murder, but that he maybe he didn't. It's just so strange to like repeat it. This is who I am, and this is my crime, right? Don't you know? So it's very, very interesting. Okay, so I want to go. If this bothers you, you guys look away. I'm just gonna go through. The painting was named Motherhood, which is interesting, him being a Cancer. Either birth date, he's a Cancer. And he talks about how he hates artists like himself. He hates them. He can't stand any type of group. And and there's his railing against groups and collectives. And then he talks about meeting her as if noticing that she saw this image of loneliness in the painting, this woman walking along the ocean. And then comes out the true theme of this novel, which is loneliness, which is isolation, which comes clear as we read deeper into the text and realize that he's lived his whole life alone. And he expresses there's a quote in the novel where he says that all his years of being alone were crystallized in Maria's character. So it's like it's a revelation of the method, of the fact that his imagination created this one perfect woman who could see him through the painting that he did that represented his experience of isolation, like mirrors within mirrors here. And so the self trying to see the self ultimately is what we're doing here. This was the ultimate purpose of Kafka's The Castle. Now reading Kafka is a total mindfuck, but The Castle's interesting because all the imagery the book's created in this mind, and it shows it. And the German even says it. It uses the term gaze that's translated, but I forget the German term right now. But these are all examples of stories where they're describing how man creates a movie in his mind, creates a reality, has the capacity to create realities in his mind and convince other people of it. Hilarious. Okay, so I'm going to go through. I'm going to read the dream sequence, and I'm going to read the quote about the metaphor of living in a tunnel his whole life. Oh, some quotes here. Twilight Mist noted, he loves and despises his loneliness then. He must. Even when with her he was alone, they were alone together. Yeah, that's well said. I mean, both levels, right? Alone with another person, but they're alone in each other. And the bridge between them is often not even there. There's no bridge. He says things, he asks her questions. She doesn't really answer the questions. She just make things, he analyzes all her expressions and sighs and looks and because he can't get words out of her. And she dismisses any type of direct communication as farce, as not real. This is fascinating too, because, at a deep level of human communication, words get in the way. They don't necessarily create a bridge between a person and another. Words actually obstruct our ability to feel and sense another human being. And so often a human's use of words is an obstruction. Isn't that a fascinating concept? Great literature always points this out, how language is in itself a fall, it expresses the fall of man. Those ideas that we were all clairvoyant or clairaudient, I forget the term, telepathic, that the Tower Babel is actually language. All these languages created, but language itself created. Because do we need language? Does the spirit talk? No. We hear it as talk in our minds, and we think it's our own thoughts, or we think it's the spirit, or we see it. Such as right, how to express it, such as the nature of reality. It's barely graspable. So language is all great literature exposes the limitations of expression in language. And so the character of Maria, the projected character, is actually correct in her assessment of things. I mean, at some point she just tells Juan what he's doing. He's like, you're just like, cycling again. Like you're not, reality's not that easy to understand. Of course, if we look at it in 3D, like he's trying to own her, he's trying to possess her. And she's like, tells him only later on that she has all these complications, all these social complications. She's married. She doesn't even tell him. She leaves it for him to find out, as if she wants him to hit the reality of it like a car crash. That's so fascinating. Yeah, I like that, Beth. A form of defeated passivity. And then Twilight Miss said she evades all his direct questions, but when she does share openly, he discounts it. That's right. That's right. A good catch. He refuses to see her point of view on anything, even when she has insight to their relational dynamic. That's really well said. And that's really right on because Beth adds, Maria seems flat, defeated, resigned right from the beginning. It's as if she's too exhausted, spent by her life to engage with one. Yeah, because she is that woman in the picture, in the painting. Right. She saw herself in that image, that motherhood image. And that woman wasn't real. It was a figure on a painting, right? And so the recognition that she saw wasn't some soulmate of one. It was somehow one had drawn her image up, her fantastical image then came to life. And it's in its reality, like Juan's response, as you guys both note, is that he doesn't, it's only his reality that's possible, right? It's completely narcissist. And she's like an echo, right, of consciousness if we go into the mythology. Whatever he expresses, she seems to only narrate, not really have a voice to speak. And when she does speak, he misses it. He can't hear it. He doesn't want to hear it. He discounts it. Yeah, it's very interesting. And Twilight Miss added, she also waits for him to make a choice about her. For the most part, this is me. Take it or leave it. I will not give you the obstacles you seek. Interesting. Very, very interesting. That's very, very powerful because if you think about it, it's two humans kind of calling each other out. And that's kind of what we do as humans. Like, nope, this is who I am, this is where I'm at. And not even wording, like the character's not even putting words to it. Like he's finding it out so that he can experience it and respond or react to it. And so she's putting it in front of him for him to respond to. So that he has to be responsible in his choice of whether to do this or that. But it's very interesting. She doesn't put obstructions in the way. She doesn't put the words in the way. She just puts her reality forth. She's just is. She just is. And he's attempting to control it through words. And she knows that, so she can't fight him on that level. And so it's a war. I mean, but all love is a war, right? I mean, there's in astrology, it's the first and the seventh house. First house rules the self, seventh rules the partner, the other. This is so fascinating. Okay, so let's see what else. Toilet says she doesn't hide anything really. She doesn't bring it up because she doesn't have to. And then Beth said, yes, she's miles ahead of him and already decided upon the futility of their relationship. Wow, you guys got it. I don't know why I'm talking. That's exactly it. There, there's an understanding of the reality that's up for negotiation, or not at all. There's no pretension by Maria's character. It's very simple. She sees the painting, she recognizes her unreality or her exhausted reality, and one misinterprets it as a sign of soulmate or of a way to lose himself or someone to control or some heaven, right? Some heaven to escape his hell from and into. And so the character of one invents, creates, projects onto this person or two-dimensional character some kind of lifeboat for himself, some way to survive the emptiness. And we find this in the final sequence, which I might just go to my own site to read because otherwise I have to look for it. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave it black for a minute. I'm going to read the dream sequence and then I'll read the final part which confirms this, which confirms his existence in a tunnel and that he's isolated. I woke up trying to scream. I was standing in the middle of the studio. This is what I had dreamed. Several people, including myself, had an appointment at a man's house. I reached the house, which from the outside looked like any other, and went in. As I entered, I immediately sensed that it was not the same, that it was different from any other. The owner said, I've been expecting you. I suspected I'd fallen into a trap and I tried to escape. I made an enormous effort, but it was too late. My body no longer obeyed me. I resigned myself and prepared to observe what was to happen, as if it had no relation to me. The man began to change me into a bird, into a man-sized bird. He began with my feet. I saw them gradually turning into something like rooster claws. Then my whole body began to change, from feet up, like water rising in a pool. My only hope now lay with my friends, who unaccountably had not yet arrived. When they finally did, they came, something horrible happened. They didn't notice my transformation. They behaved normally, proving they thought I looked the same as I always did. Convinced that the magus had cast a spell that caused them to see a normal person, I determined to tell them what he had done to me. I had intended to tell his fantastic experience calmly, in order not to make matters worse with some rash reaction that might anger the magus, causing him to do something even worse. But when I began to speak, it was at the top of my voice. Then I was amazed by two facts. The words I wanted to say came out as squawks, screeches that fell on my ears, as desperate and alien. Perhaps there was still something human about them, and what was infinitely worse, my friends did not hear the squawking, just as they had not seen my enormous bird body. On the contrary, they seemed to be hearing my normal voice saying normal things, because they showed no surprise. Terrified, I fell silent. The owner of the house was watching me with a sardonic glint in his eyes that was nearly imperceptible. In any case, seen only by me, I understood then that no one ever would know that I had been changed into a bird. I was lost. The secret would go with me to the tomb. All right, let me look at you guys' comments. Let's see. Yeah, yeah, right. Exactly, Beth. Which is more backing for the conclusion that there's no one in the story. It's just a narration of a ghost relating with his own ghost vision of a person. Let's see what else. A fixed incarnation cross of some sort, yeah. Well, a fixed incarnation cross would be the juxtaposition cross. And that could be Sabatos, if that was correct. I know the 4-1 has the juxtaposition. I'm trying to remember if the 1-4. I think the 4-1 has it too. So that makes sense. So what I just read, he has a dream. He dreams he's a bird. He tries to talk. He starts squawking, like in screeches, loud screeches. All his friends perceive him the same. Some magus did this to him, right? Some magician. So what's evident here? He was lost, he said. The secret would go with him to the tomb. He was lost forever. What does that tell us? He has no friends. There is no magus. He's just trapped in his own world, making things up. And then do you guys want to read along or not to the last quote? I'm just because I could go to my YouTube and read from the post because it's in my post. If not, I'll just read. Twilight Mist is saying, I'm noticing because that's what I am. Oh my gosh. I don't remember. Maybe you are juxtaposition cross. That's hilarious. All right, I'm just gonna find channel and find the quote. Yeah, yeah. If you're 4-1, then you're at juxtaposition cross, which is a very fixed destiny. No one can throw you off. My buddy Neil's a 4-1. I just did a reading for him a couple weeks ago. He's so fixed in his expression that I don't even try to derail him. I don't even try. It feels like with a 4-1, like they're gonna think what they think. There's not much that can be not that nothing can be added, of course. Like obviously you're very open, um, and aware. It's just there's I think a fixed like perception maybe. We'll have to go into that more another time. Okay, I'm getting lost in YouTube ads. How ridiculous. Yeah, for another time. Yeah, I mean these are words, right? These are words that are getting in the way of our understanding. What does it mean, the cross of depth? I would start with the gates, the meaning of the gates. Ultimately, the juxtaposition cross is, or any cross, is a meaning of the four particular gates together. There's a little more than that, but that's a good start. And what am I doing here? Oh, I'm going to my posts so I can share. Yeah, Tuesday. We'll sort it out on Tuesday exactly. Okay, so I'm going to share this. So I'll read the final quote and then we'll be out of here. I've been on for a long time. Uh, so what I'm doing is you guys can you'll tell in a minute is I'm just presenting more evidence for there being nothing but a tunnel, nothing but a voice in a tunnel. Okay, let me know if you guys can see it. I'm reading from Okay, so here we go. Did you guys like my image of the man on the train, on the BART train? And like it's blurred and like he's just peeking out the window, trapped in the glass. I didn't get many likes. I think I got 2 likes. And I think one of them was mine because I didn't want it to be 0. I thought it was cool. Okay, I'm gonna read it now. And it was as if the two of us had been living in parallel passageways or tunnels, never knowing that we were moving side by side, like souls in like times, finally to meet at the end of those passageways before a scene I had painted as a kind of key meant for her alone, as a kind of secret sign that I was there ahead of her, and that the passageways finally had joined, and the hour for a meeting had come. The hour for a meeting had come, as if the passages had ever even joined, as if we really ever communicated. What a stupid illusion that had been. No passageways were parallel, as they had always been. Only now the wall separating them was like a glass wall, and I could see Maria's silent, untouchable figure. No, even that wall was not always glass. Oh, what did I do with the image? At times it again became black stone, and then I did not know what was happening on the other side. What had become of her in those unfathomable intervals? What strange events might be taking place? I was even convinced that during those moments her face changed, that her lips curled with scorn, and she was perhaps laughing with some other man, and that the whole story of the passageways was my own ridiculous invention, and that after all, there was only one tunnel, dark and solitary, mine, the tunnel in which I had spent my childhood, my youth, my entire life. And so, confirmation of what you guys said, he realized that or was it? Yeah, there was no key that was meant for her alone. There wasn't a secret sign. Um, they'd never communicated. There was even if you look at the dialogue again or the in the story, there is no dialogue. They're not really talking to each other. It's fascinating. I mean, they seem to at parts and it's directed to, but not really, as you guys are saying. Silent, untouchable figure, glass. I love this idea of the glass becoming black stone because that's like a scrying mirror. So even more separation from reality, even more confirmation that there is no person on the other side. What else? What did you didn't see till now, Beth? Oh, the posts? Oh yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm, messing with chat. I don't talk to chat GPT. I forbid myself that. But I do like to create images. I find it creative. It's a fun creative endeavor. There's specific images I want, and so it was cool to create this. I was happy with it. Feel free to put a like on it. And then the final quote, is that the final quote? Do you guys see the one I did of The Shining? I did the quote where Jack's being interviewed and they tell him that The only thing that can get trying on here is a tremendous sense of isolation because people, for some people, solitude and isolation can in of itself become a problem. And then Jack says, not for me. We all know the outcome of that, which again is just like in the tunnel, is possibly imaginative. Possibly none of those things occurred in the Shining film as well. Thomas, has quite an ditto. Correct. Yeah, correct, Beth. Yeah, there was no. I think what we look for in these stories is the revelation of who he was and where he was. In the tunnel, the revelation is not 3D really. He just says he was in a tunnel his whole life. In Invention of Morale, which I'll read next, there's a part that if you're not listening, you'll miss, where there's the revelation of where that character really is. It's fascinating. Let's see. Okay, so this is just another variation. This is the last part of it. I'll read this quote. Um, yeah, exactly. Her character is superfluous. He's just the sole kind of awareness. And in one of those transparent sections of the stone wall, I'd seen this girl and had naively believed that she was moving in a tunnel parallel to mine, when in fact she belonged to the wide world, the unbounded world of those who did not live in tunnels. And perhaps out of curiosity, she had approached one of my strange windows and had glimpsed the spectacle of my unredeemable solitude, or had been intrigued by the mute message, the key of my painting. And then while I kept moving through my passageway, she, living her normal life outside the exciting life of people who live outside, that curious and absurd life in which there are dances and parties and gaiety and frivolity. And sometimes it happened that when I passed by one of my windows, she was waiting for me, silent and anxious. Why waiting for me? Why silent? Why anxious? But at other times she did not come in time, or she forgot the poor caged being. And then I myself, my face pressed against the wall of glass, watched her in the distance, laughing or dancing without a care in the world. Or which was worse, I didn't see her at all, and imagined her in the obscene places I could not reach. At those times I felt that my destiny was infinitely more lonely than I had ever imagined. I love this image. But to say that I love it just means that it expresses something very evocative for me, for myself, for my own experiences of isolation. I think I don't know why I indulge in it. Okay. No, I'm sure I know why. The same reason all of us indulge in horror and pathos. It's because we're trying to understand our experience. That's why horror books sell, because people have gone through horrific things and they don't know how to name it. They just have the taste of it on their tongues, the shadow of it in their minds. So all they can do is look for literature or film creation by other humans that can shed some light on and bring them back to the feelings of horror that they felt so they could perhaps get more identification with them. Okay, I'll stop waxing philosophic or poetic. See your guys' quotes. Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. I mean, to create a story, you can't create someone talking to themselves, right? So you can. And that's essentially what these stories all are. This is the first person narrations of many Poe stories. Dostoevsky's Underground Man, many Kafka stories. Adolfo Bioy Casares' The Invention of Moral that I keep repeatingly saying I'm going to read next. Some of Borges's stories, Jorge Luis Borges, real master at this craft, this fabulous style. And it gets deeper with Borges because Borges starts to just play with two-dimensional characters. And the real characterization of the stories is actually space and time. And this has a certain effect on the reader. It's like ancient Sufi parables. Like there's a mystical effect on reading a short story by Jorge Luis Borges. And I'll pick one to read eventually. Borges's work is like people become obsessed with his work. In college, I became we really didn't even read Borges. I read Borges. I found out about him through a short story collection we were reading. And after reading that first short story by him, I became obsessed and read Borges for years after, and still don't understand what the hell I read. Um, why the death suicide of is dropped at the end of the novel. Allende? Are you talking about Allende? Are you talking about Allende or Hunter? Yeah, there was a suicide, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, Allende, I think. Huh. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's something to look at deeper. Oh, her husband. Oh yeah, yeah, the blind guy. Right. There's a whole another level of Sabato stories. He's obsessed with blindness. So there's always a character that's blind. And there's always like incest. Um, and there's always just like imaginary characters, like in imaginary dialogues. Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. The blind husband who tried to fight him blind. There's a sudden drop without narrative. It's the last one or two sentences. I'll look in. I have the novel right here, so I'll look. Yeah. Someday I may be able to do it, and at that time I will also analyze the reasons for Allende's suicide. Well, if he was her husband, right, and she was murdered, maybe that's why he killed himself. I mean, I'm just talking about the 3D meaning. I don't know if that's your question in relation to it. He would have been acutely aware of her transgressions, yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Beth. And that's why shame is another main theme in this novel that I don't know why the literary reviewers don't write about that. I mean, shame is mentioned many times in the novel. And, shame is usually the reason for violence. Someone's shame is about to be expressed, and then the ego of the narcissistic being, which is the soulless person who only has the ego of which to survive by, is ashamed by the ego being its reality being called into question, and so would rather murder to hide it or to cover it up. And so why does the character murder his love? To hide the shame of it, of being in love with her and her reality trappings and her situations. Yeah, it's so interesting because there's something. I'll read what you guys are saying. So let's see. Why in writing would a writer drop a bomb like that at the end? Question is more compositional. I agree with what you said, Beth. He could not bear for it to be sounded out loud. I mean, no, this is a big issue with humans. They cannot bear to have their shame uttered out loud. Correct. It forced him to face it all, his inability to do anything about any of it, and the facade of his marriage overall, I suppose. The natural collateral damage from such things, I guess. Yeah, maybe it was okay so long as it was hidden, even poorly hidden. The irony of the blind man, right? as a metaphor. Couldn't see what his wife was doing or what was really happening. There's a literary play with it. There's a lot of things at the end that are kind of strange. One thing at the end on the last page, he starts getting obsessed with the term, the blind man's last word, fool, as an infinite wariness, or maybe some obscure instinct, always prevents me. He says, I've been locked up and I've tried many times to think about the blind man's last word, fool, an infinite wariness, or maybe some obscure instinct, always prevents me. Someday I may be able to do it, and at that time I will also analyze the reasons for Allende's suicide. At least I can paint, although I suspect the doctors are laughing behind my back, as I suspect they laughed during the trial while I talked about the scene of the window. There was only one person who understood my paintings, and meanwhile these paintings must only be providing more evidence for their diagnosis. And so every day the walls of this hell will close more tightly around me. Yeah, that's a good point, Beth. Sign of the era, hidden relationships. Was he yelling fool at both of them? That's, I don't think so. Maybe. It's strange. It was strange. He could have been calling himself a fool because people are blind, seeing only what they want or need to see oftentimes. As long as the status quo remains, keeping everything socially comfortable. Yeah, that which shall not be named, possibly screaming at himself, as well as Jose. Who's Jose? You mean Juan? Yeah, there's probably more to it. There's probably more to that ending there. In the second novel, in the middle of it, there's a reference to the tunnel and the murders. So, because the next novel takes place in Argentina. And so it's quite interesting. All right, you guys, we'll go for a couple more minutes. Share with me, did you enjoy hearing the novel? What did you guys think? I mean, it's hard to ask that question, right? There's so many layers, and it's horrific. So I don't know what I mean by when I ask did you enjoy it. Perhaps enjoy it as a reminder of the way the human mind works, right? I said yes, Juan. I do that with those names. Oh, interchange them. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Beth. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I did put literature on my YouTube a while back when I started it. So I knew at some point I would read my favorite literary texts, and I love doing that because then it becomes more alive for me, reading it out loud, expressing it, and then getting to go deep with you guys on it. It was a lot of fun. Trilemicity, I enjoyed it very much, as odd as it was. It's strange that you only realize what it's really talking about after it's over and you're discussing. Exactly. Which is why I think the discussion is so important. But I don't even know if I would have done it if it wasn't for Beth saying something. I didn't think about that. But now I love that I did. So thanks for that, Beth. Thanks for both you guys being here. Oh, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Twilis, thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know. My voice gets tired quick. I want to be like those, robotic audiobook readers who read for like, it seems like, 10 hours long. I need to like find a professional, ask them how they do it. Yeah, no, it was very well written, Beth. This is the next one, The Invention of Morel, is more of diary format, and it's written by we don't even know the guy's name. We just know he's a fugitive. He's running away from the law, and he describes himself as being in one place. But there's a secret, if you read the secret revelations, if you hear the story very closely, which you guys will, then you'll hear the point at which he admits where he really is. It's a total mind fuck. It's one of the most fascinating novels of the 20th century. It's highly respected, but it's still relatively unknown outside of the literary elite circles. I don't even know if anyone knew about it in, where I went to college, where I went to university. I don't think anyone really knew about it. Only a handful of us were in the Borges. And those of us who were in the Borges were obsessed. And Borges is pretty much the flag for Argentinian literature. He's the most known. But for those who dug deeper into Borges, they found Sabato, they found Bioy Casares, who was Borges' best friend, and a handful of other great Argentinian poets and writers. So thanks so much, you guys. Yeah, I'll start the next one hopefully this weekend, and at least recording it. I don't know. I'll probably have to release it too because I don't have anything else. So yeah, thanks so much for being here, and I'm gonna stop share my image. I don't even know if it's showing, but oh, the thing I enjoyed about the way you released the readings is that it reminded me of how delicious the waiting can be. That's a rare thing these days when everything is too immediate. Delayed gratification is a good thing. Oh yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, for sure. For sure. You know. Okay, you guys, thanks so much. And oh, create a playlist. Okay. Thanks, Sharon. So you enjoyed yeah, I'll figure out how to create a playlist. I've been wanting to do that because I'm starting to have so many videos now. It's starting to look really unorganized. So I think I know how to do that, of course, just like music. Okay, I'll do that. Thanks so much for being here too. What was it, three you guys? And then two others. And I think it was Jay and then maybe someone else. Awesome. Okay, you guys take care. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream. You see six right now? What does that mean? Hey, you guys are welcome. Thanks so much. More comments.